Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elaine Agar. In this chat, I speak with Atif Rafiq, who is a former Fortune 500 executive turned tech entrepreneur. And we really explore his journey through the realms of AI and entrepreneurship. Atif shared his experience transitioning from a high-flying corporate career to launching his startup called Ritual, aiming to blend human creativity with AI efficiency. He also highlighted the necessity of upskilling in an AI-driven era and the importance of psychological safety in leadership. Remember, embracing challenges and pushing beyond comfort zones are keys to success in this rapidly evolving business landscape. So make sure to tune into this conversation. I think you're going to find it interesting, especially if you're interested in tech and entrepreneurship. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Atif, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Hi, Elena. It's great to be with you.
I'm very excited to chat with you today for numerous reasons, not only because you're LinkedIn top voice and I'm aspiring to be LinkedIn top voice, and you have gained a huge following just through the work that you're doing with AI, with entrepreneurship, the various engagements that you're in, and the speaking that you do kind of within the US and globally on these topics. So I think you are probably one of the most followed people on LinkedIn in my network in terms of the quality content that you produce. So I very much appreciate that as a fellow LinkedIner. But before we go into more detail about AI and kind of future work and your kind of work within that, I'm curious to know about how did you get to where you are today? What's the career story?
Sure, Elena. Well, thank you so much for recognizing, some of the work I do. I try my best. Um, my career story is really one of metamorphosis. That's probably the key word, and I've metamorphosized three times, and maybe there will be more. So yeah, just to walk you through it, I started in the internet business, very early, 2 years out of college. I had worked for Goldman Sachs and decided I didn't like investment banking at all. I couldn't understand the product. It didn't really feel like a product. But this thing called the internet, was sounded like a really cool product. It might go somewhere. So I I wrote a letter. I put it in the snail mail to the founder and CEO of a company. Maybe some of you have heard of, maybe not, AOL. And it was the dominant sort of internet company in the mid 90s. And the CEO actually read the letter and responded to this 23-year-old and connected me to someone in the organization, and I got a job there. So the rest was sort of history in the sense of sticking with, really interesting internet companies shaping different verticals. And eventually I became a general manager at Amazon, which is sort of like the head of a business unit. And I was running part of the Kindle. And you can keep doing, a tech job, just ride the next wave, whatever that happens to be. It could be, crypto, it could be AI. You could just sort of stay in a tech company. um, but in 2013 I got a call from the CEO of McDonald's, and I was like, you've got the wrong person. Like, what could I possibly do for McDonald's? And he mentioned that, he had a very strong vision for digitization, and one thing led to another, and I became the first chief digital officer in the history of the Fortune 500. It wasn't a role. I mean, today, CTO roles or CDO, CIO roles are very common in every company, whether it's healthcare or retail, so on and so forth. But it wasn't a thing, when I got started with it. So I was the guinea pig, so to speak, and sort of coming into a traditional legacy company and trying to, increase the metabolism, get these companies to innovate and really grow consumer experience and business model. And so I did that, and it worked out well. And I kind of grew in doing that kind of work and increased capacities. Eventually, I became president of a Fortune 300 company, something I had not imagined I would do before, and that brought even more responsibility. So in the end, at the end of that chapter, at that point, I had managed probably 10,000 knowledge workers in my career. So I really am familiar with companies of, certainly a big scale and smaller scales. So then, it was time for metamorphosis, and that was 3 years ago, where I actually jumped off the corporate hamster wheel and took a hard left and said, I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. So I started a company with my co-founder, and we bootstrapped this company for 3 years. The company is called Ritual, and we had a hypothesis around how companies, innovate and progress their ideas. We came up with a workflow technology with an AI component, and then, of course, 15 months ago, OpenAI hits the scene. So it's been really a rocket booster for what we're doing. So for me, it's always when I'm in, focus on something. I mean, I'm probably going to do it for 10 years. Um, but I'm always open to kind of metamorphosizing into what's next after you climb one mountain.
Well, it's almost like we don't have a choice these days, at least from some of the things that I've read from some of your content. But we're going to get into that in just a minute. I think we all need to continue to raise the bar essentially, and just our skill set and so on. I'm curious, when did you know it was the right time to leave the corporate world? Because you were very successful, you reached, and then kind of to pivot and leave the comfort zone of a high level position and decided to bootstrap your own thing. When did you know, or did you know, or was it just like you're like, what, maybe it's just time?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's the thing that you should do on paper, and there's the thing you really want to do, and that really is what this fork in the road came down to. Where logically, if you've been the president of a Fortune 300 company, the next role is to be the CEO of something big, Starbucks or something like that, right? You want to kind of give it a go at that next level. That would be the right thing to do on paper, but that didn't feel right to me because you know, um, being the leader in a large public company, 50% is of it, is not really creating new things or playing with new ideas. It's more about you know firefighting and governance and all things that are very important. Trust me, I don't discount any of that work. I do some of that as a board member of public companies today, but it wasn't what I wanted to commit the next 10 years to. And one thing I didn't share is that in my mid 20s, I started a software company in Silicon Valley with three amazing co-founders, and we raised multiple rounds. And you know, deep inside of me, there was an entrepreneurial drive to really do the 0 to 1 thing. And so, when the company I was with, you know, hit COVID, and the business hit a kind of a turnaround, became a turnaround story as opposed to a growth story. I figured that was a good time for me to kind of take advantage of the window of opportunity so I wouldn't have a regret.
Mm. I'm curious, there's a lot of, first of all, entrepreneurship is very sexy and trendy right now. And there's a lot of, young people out there that are maybe thinking about going into it, or just, career people that are just kind of looking to jump ship. And, as I hear somebody like yourself who had a very successful career, right? And it's like, well, yeah, it makes sense for him to do that. But I'm sure there were fears that you had. Would you mind sharing some of those fears, like starting a business, if there was any, or what are some, I guess, challenges that you've encountered as you decided to, start yet another, obviously, a journey?
Well, it's such a different animal being an entrepreneur than being, a manager of something that's already up and running. And that in the end is just completely 180 from each other because, as an entrepreneur, stating the obvious, you don't have anyone else to look toward to meet the need or get the job done. So, it's really requires a ton of capacity and bandwidth to bootstrap. I mean, if you okay, the product's going to work, but you need to do some content marketing, or you need to make a sales pitch, or you need to cook up a demo, or you need to, write up something for investors. There's no one to look to. You have to roll up the sleeves and do all of those things. And so, what my advice to people looking at entrepreneurship is basically, I mean, um, if you're not scared of hard work and you believe in your own ability to kind of figure things out, I think it's a great fit. But if you think that just simply having a promising idea is enough, then you're in for a very big surprise because it's really about having the uh, just the staying power to and the capacity, the willingness to kind of do the work and just get the job done. Now, if you do that, I think the promise is pretty tremendous because after 2 or 3 years, you're like, wow, how do we build this, just with 10 or 15 people? It could be uh, pretty kind of special. You will have built something unique that is not out there in the world. And that's an amazing feeling.
Hmm. I'm also curious, a lot of leaders out there and entrepreneurs that I speak with, it's quite lonely up there, and we don't know what we don't know. So how do you manage not only, I guess, that awareness piece of like, well, yes, you kind of you know what you're doing, right? But then I'm sure there's like, well, I wonder what I don't know. Like, who do you surround yourself with that, if anybody? And how do you just manage that being up top? Because it is very stressful and it is very lonely at times. And so how do you manage that?
Well, I think you raise a great point, which is as a leader, you only have a limited slice of the information you need to make good decisions. And of course, any rational person would say, yes, I want to be better informed. So I will look to other people around the table for that input. Now, the catch is, as a leader, if you don't create the conditions for that, let's say psychological safety, then you're not going to get that information.
Mhm,
So you kind of reap what you sow. And that's very hard for some people because you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't create an environment where it's a control kind of leadership model. And you want yes people around the table, and you want to know that your way or the highway type of thing, and then also expect that you're going to get useful information about blind spots or different ways of thinking about things. You have to pick. So I prefer
mhm,
a leadership model that I call calibration over control, which is I want to know how you think first of all, and then if you're thinking like spot on, I'll let you know that. And if there's a tweak, then I'll let you know that. And that I think is fair balance in terms of getting people to contribute, provide input, because they know there's some psychological safety where, yeah, I mean, they kind of the merits of the ideas sort of speak for themselves. So it's really about creating the right conditions around the
mhm.
table, and that's how you avoid becoming a lonely leader. uh,
Yeah.
what I've tried.
Yeah. How do you manage the, I guess, just the overall wellness piece of it all, right? Because I think that's another romanticized idea, and there's a lot of talk about burnout and all that. And yes, I sympathize with people that go through burnout, but I always feel like part of it is just it's just the game. Like, it's like you said, like you gotta work hard. And I'm just curious, like, what do you think about in general, like, the managing your energy? How do you manage your energy? In your work? Do you believe in that balance, or is it really just like sometimes it's just grind work? How have has been your experience? You've done this for so many years.
Sometimes we don't have choice, and then you need to call it the reserves of energy. But, you make a great point. You need to have those reserves of energy. So what I believe in is something I didn't coin. I learned it from other people or practitioners of regenerative energy, which is, being able to kind of utilize it, but also, knowing what are the things that kind of create energy for you, in your downtime, and
Mm,
using that wisely, but then also building capacity for more energy, which of course comes from, probably things like exercise and really, of various kinds. I mean, that can be anything from like hot yoga to, running
mhm,
or cycling or weights or etc. But I mean, I think those things kind of help you certainly build capacity. Um, I think that burnout is a real factor. So, and then an important component is the psychological one, where are you working with the people that you respect, who respect you, who value your contribution, make you feel heard and understood. This is also an important contribution that leaders can make, because I mean, the leaders can hold a meeting and hold it in two different ways. One will detract from energy, and some will create energy, and
mhm.
that's an important part of it too. So it's about the collective as well as the individual contribution to making sure you have the energy to sustain yourself.
Mm. I'm sure also having a purpose in the work that you do probably helps as well. I think the most draining thing a person can do is do something they don't enjoy, they don't feel connected to it, but it seems like you have quite a bit of purpose in the work that you do. So what would that purpose be for you?
For me, at the moment, as I say, I keep metamorphosizing every 10 years. So at this one is basically, to create a future where knowledge workers do have a future and a good future. I recognize that companies will always seek to, grow profitability. And when they look at things like AI and different types of tech-driven efficiencies, they'll take those because those will drop straight to the bottom line. And, I'd like to contribute to help companies move faster and smarter, get that efficiency, but at the same time, um, upskill people for the AI era. So for me, purpose comes down to making work sustainable. We talked about sustainability, in a little bit of a different way in terms of having the energy to do the work. I'm talking about whether the work will actually be there in the end for the humans.
Mm.
And I think that is very important because, at this point, I can probably say what I think about big companies, but, I think if you're a CEO, your legacy is going to be determined here in the next 5 to 7 years. Are you the CEO who just grew profits, or you actually created sustainable work for humans?
Yeah, yeah, we can go down the rabbit hole of that part. Maybe we'll save it for another time. I won't throw it in there today. But there's been a lot of reports, of course, about AI and how it's going to replace jobs. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. There was I think it was in the Fortune magazine. You were at an event and you were saying that AI doesn't necessarily is not necessarily going to replace jobs, but it's going to require like 100% of jobs will require upskilling, as you were just kind of mentioning, and that AI essentially just raises the bar of like, it's just becoming more and more competitive. And I'm curious because there's a report recently through Pew Research, I think. And what they were saying is that the most people that are impacted by AI are bachelor degree holders compared to like, so it was like 27% of bachelor degree holders are going to be impacted versus 6% of 5% of high school degree holders. And that's because the high school degree holders will usually go maybe into blue collar jobs and so on. So if you look at it from two different sides, blue collar workers, right? Because like we're always going to need an HVAC guy. We're always going to need potentially like any handy kind of work, right? But then like the marketing people, a lot of accounting stuff, like that's becoming more and more automated. I mean, I use a bunch of tools for my marketing. I don't even, I don't need to hire anybody. So I'm curious, from blue collar, white collar workers, what do you see as opportunities for upskilling? Or maybe blue collar workers, keep doing what you're doing because you're still relevant, you're going to be relevant.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some, I think, power that comes to blue collar workers because it's a marketplace, and if the supply and demand is out of the whack, then they can see some growth in terms of their wages and whatnot. Um, but I think we should stop kidding ourselves because in the end, what is the aspiration everybody wants? Is they want to be earning what white collar workers earn today. And I think that that's where I focus. Um, that's where I focus my work. So, what's the difference between the way it works right now and what the way it'll work in the future? In my mind, it comes down to um, whether you're originating new knowledge that your company needs or simply administrating knowledge it already has. And let me walk
Mm,
through the difference. So, I would say if you go to your typical large company today, most of the knowledge workers, white collar folks, are essentially administrating things the company already knows. And maybe that knowledge was created 5, 10, 20 years ago. They learned what they needed to crack through on a new product or a new innovation, a new business model. And now they're just sort of like, some people know the ins and outs of that and they just administrate that to keep it on track or do it a little bit better every year. That is very, that's, I think, very vulnerable to AI because, AI just can be take a repository of knowledge, and you think of every PowerPoint and email and document in your company, and there's a lot of knowledge in there. And now you can ask a question. So you don't need to ask somebody, nobody is like the person who like has institutional knowledge, so to speak. You're going to be able to interact with it through software. So then, where humans need to be contributing more is originating new knowledge. And so, where do companies need new knowledge, Elena? They need it around, their growth areas, the new problems, the new problem solving frontier. All the areas where there's a lot of unknown, and that's where AI hasn't doesn't have anything to work with yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, we need to focus our knowledge work activity more around, making sense of unknowns and really generating new knowledge for the company to make decisions and to accelerate, whatever its strategy happens to be. There, I think we have a very viable future for humans.
Hmm. And it makes sense, right? And like everybody, all the companies should be doing it, but I still see a lot of companies are more reactive versus proactive. And there are a few companies out there, probably more than a few, but a few that I know of that are having kind of future teams where it's just a team of people, however many people, that only focus on disruptions coming in the industry in the next 1 to 2 years in that specific industry, and that's their focus, is like to look at the upcoming problems and challenges and try to get ahead of it, versus a lot of companies these days are just worried about today. And you mentioned earlier, and the CEOs of companies are going to either be the ones that just made profit 5 7 years from now, or that actually took the company further, because I think it's going to be, just based on what's happening, the world of business is gonna, you're either gonna make it or break it type thing in the next several years. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, you can grow a company's profits by, cutting costs. You can reward shareholders by paying dividends. I mean, all those things kind of get big CEOs part of the way there, but still, there's always a piece which is needs to be new. And
Mm-hmm.
I think increasingly that nugget to solve for is growing, and it's harder to get. So I think it is in the interest of the C-suite and the CEOs to to have not only more people, but working on the new frontiers of things, the new opportunities, but also to have them work more effectively, because you probably need a good hit rate. I mean, if you have four things, you probably really need two of those things to work out, not one of them, right? And so it's going to serve the interest of the company as well if those folks imagine a world where the company gets what it needs because they're solving meaningful problems better and faster. The
Mm-hmm.
people working in those teams are making a contribution, so they are valued, and and at the same time they get upskilled because they're working with AI to on sort of these new meaningful problem solving activities on behalf of their companies. I think that's the world we want to create in business.
Mm-hmm. How are you, what's the work that you're doing with Ritual? How are you hoping, that it's going to go in the next 1 to 2 years? What are the aspirations?
The aspirations are to essentially be a problem solving engine that brings the best of human contribution with AI to help companies move from idea to execution faster. Because what's not as hard for companies is, oh, are there some promising ideas, or are there some objectives? Like everyone has these OKRs. The O part is very easy, right? Because it's like you know it's very high altitude, and it's um, it's not defined how to get there. The
Mm-hmm.
part is now, the the nuts and bolts of like, okay, well, there's a bunch of unknowns, there's a bunch of questions, there's a bunch of forks in the road. I mean, that's what teams spend weeks or months working on, navigating, trying to be clear to themselves first. And imagine trying to be clear to yourself as one person. Now you're trying to be clear amongst 5 or 6 people in a working team. And now you're trying to be clear amongst 12 people in a stakeholder group. And now you're trying to be clear amongst, 35 people who have some say in it, and all of that single idea. That's the life you live when you're working in a corporation. And the thing has never been done before. I mean, there's just a ton of ambiguity. So what we do is provide a workflow which starts with simple things like help you define the problem, come up with a problem statement, or if you have a clear problem statement, come up with the right questions so that you don't have blind spots and you know what to spend time on when you're doing exploration and discovery, and to actually do a good job of exploration before you jump to solutioning,
Hmm.
because there's pressure to deliver, so you might jump from the objective to the solution. You haven't done exploration, you haven't defined the problem well, you don't know what the key questions are. You're kind of beginning to prototype or move to some execution before you have high quality information to really yeah, define that solution. That's like a whole. This is not something that needs to be. This can be systematized into a workflow, and then when you add AI, it can just really um, raise the bar and help you avoid do better work and avoid blind spots.
Hmm. I can also imagine a lot of companies probably focus on the wrong problem to begin with. So if there's a there's a way to find out what's the right problem, that's a great tool by itself.
Right, all the way at the beginning, the problem starts, right? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, as you know, Elena, then we get 90 days into it, and it's like, wait, we're in a room here, we're meeting. Oh, I thought the problem we're trying to solve was X. They thought it's Y. Okay,
Hmm.
now where are we? 100 days have gone by. That's not good. And it's very common. It's human. It's a human factor, right? Like if you come out of a meeting with the CEO of Netflix and he says, what should we do about password sharing? Now, one person hears, oh, the CEO wants to crack down on password sharing. The other person interprets it as, hey, what's the right balance between, not losing revenue and being fair to users on our policy? Now, if we take one of those interpretations versus the other, and then we put a team against it, I guarantee you they're going to come back with different recommendations. So
Hmm.
if you haven't even structured the problem right to begin with, of course it's going to be slow and bureaucratic and painful, and we want to avoid all that.
Yeah, and then you throw in the different generations and the different, educational backgrounds of people, and it becomes very confusing. There's also a lot of talk about this generational piece. So I'm just curious, in your opinion, as a kind of a co-founder of a company now, and having led in many different senior roles, a lot of graduates right now are struggling to land a job, right? Or, to get their foot in a door. And I interview a lot of people myself, and I'm just curious from your perspective, what are the top 3 to 5 things you look for in a candidate? Aside from like, I mean, maybe it's technical, maybe you want somebody who's in AI, but I'm just curious, like, what are in your world, 3 to 5 things you look for in candidates?
I three things I look for. One is initiation, so don't wait. That's not a call to be pushy, but like be proactive and initiate on things before being asked to do them. I think that everyone would love that. And the reason for that is that, people don't have time to kind of get so organized and then say, hey, here's the contribution I'm looking for you from you. So if you just kind of anticipate it, read the tea leaves and initiate, that's
Hmm.
brilliant. I think clarity of thought is like just speak in plain language. What's your perspective, and how did you get there? Um, and you know, is there anything we need to discuss or any questions unresolved in the middle? So I think the ability to create clarity of thought is very valued skill, um, because whoever you work for would love to give you the space and the leash to leave you alone for 3 or 4 days and just get it done. The thing that allows them to do that is a mind meld of like, how are you thinking about going about it? Why? And does that make sense? And then they'll say okay, and they'll leave you alone, which is a gift for everybody. Um,
Hmm.
so I think some clarity of thought is really good. And then I think you know, to be honest with you, from an entrepreneurial perspective, just persistence, meaning like, okay, yeah, we tried something and we couldn't get it done. I mean, I'll give you something as simple as like we want to order swag for our company and we want, winter beanies and we don't want them to arrive in April because it's warm and we want them to arrive in January, and the shipper says, "Hey, we'll send them out in March." Find a way to get those accelerated. You don't have 100% control, but if you find a way to make what we want happen, through persistence or looking, not giving up is very important. So it's a great question. Those are three things I think are very valued, um, and when you have people contributing like that, that's how, as an organization, 5 people act like 10, or 5 people have the weight of 15, and that's really what you're looking for.
Yeah. I'm curious so you've accomplished a lot of different things. Is there one thing that you're most proud of out of if you had to choose one thing, what would be that one thing?
Well, I think it would be grooming leaders, and that's something, when you say that, it sounds a little bit uh, self-serving, like, "Oh my gosh, look at me, I've groomed leaders." But I really have. Is probably more.
Well,
Uh,
not now these days you even I don't even know if you can say grooming. I think that's negatively
yeah.
that has a negative connotation, but my audience is not like that, so we can use grooming.
Well, I think, when that happens, and I'll explain what I mean by it, it's
Yeah,
more a reflection of the people, and they stepped up and they made it happen.
yeah.
But yes, when I see that, for example, 5 people who work for me took on the same role that I took on, being in the, C-suite of well-known companies, that's very gratifying. When I know that, like, 5 people who work for those 5 people also did the same thing, because time
Mhm.
passed, they move up. That's great. When I see people who work for me are on public company boards, that's there, or CEOs of, let's say, mid-sized companies, all those things, that to me is really gratifying because it means that the work we did together, continued to be some fuel, um, and that the work that they're doing today, they're still, benefiting from the work we did together, and the leadership model that I tried to put in place, which I mentioned, which was around calibration. And calibration really is not just helping people solve the current problem on their plate for the company they happen to be working on. It's actually a way of kind of teaching people how to think about problems so that they could work out a problem in the future at a different company and have that problem solving skill. It's very different. It takes actually more energy. Um, and those things are just proof points for me that that's a better ship leadership model, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that I'm also going to be sharing a link to your book. And I think a lot of the things that you mentioned today, including like in the book you mentioned the 13 superpowers, right? Like helping people think and collaborate and kind of make better business decisions. So I'm going to share that in the show notes as well as your website. Is there anything else that you would want the audience to know in terms of best way to get in touch with you or anything else?
Sure. So, I have a LinkedIn newsletter. It's very popular. It's one of their top 50. It's called Rewire. So if you just punch in my name and Rewire, that'll come up. But yeah, my website for my book, Decision Sprint, decisionsprint.com, is great. And then I would encourage people to try the Ritual app. It can be used whether you're an individual or you're part of a team, or whatever you're working on, that's like an interesting problem, and maybe you're on the hook to kind of defend the idea or come up with a recommendation. You can. I do think we can help you, and that's available at app.ritual.work.
Thank you. And the last question I have for you, Atif, is the question I ask all of my guests. What is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Wow, what a wonderful thing. I mean, I think essentially around regret, like what will I regret that I'm not currently acting on? That is, a really good way to filter out the noise and the voices of other things, of society, of the things that will make you look good on LinkedIn, or what your resume should be versus like where you're really dialed in to your zone and where you do your best work or however you want to make the best use of your time. So I think 10 years from now, what would I seriously regret that's not in alignment with where I'm at, and then making that modification. I think that creates a lot of clarity in life.
Beautiful. Atif, thank you so much. I look forward to your content and Rewire newsletter. Thank you for sharing some of your thoughts and insights with us.
It's been a pleasure to join you, Elena. Thank you so much for your questions.